Hey friends, I just wanted to come on and talk to you today about a subject that is very important to me. And actually, it was the subject of my class in cardiac rehab this morning, which is what really got me thinking. Honestly, it's been on my mind throughout the whole day. And it is depression. Depression is the topic we talked about this morning in cardiac rehab, and it has just been on my mind all day because we sat in this class and there were 10 of us, and the nurse who was instructing started the class by asking how many of us had ever experienced depression. Out of 10 people in that room, 10 people raised their hands. And if you included the stories that the instructor shared, she also had dealt with depression during major illness in her life, obviously. My group, we have all been through some sort of cardiac event, which is why we are in that class together. And depression rates are very high among people with cardiac disease. It's sort of that chicken or the egg, which came first. Was it the heart disease or was it the depression, and what begat what? But again, it's got me thinking today. In a room of 11 people, that 11 people experienced depression at some point in their life, and we still have such a hard time talking about it. And it was very interesting because my group, it was honestly myself and the instructor were the only women in the group. And one of the men said that as men, we're just taught in this society, you don't talk about it. And I thought, how sad so we had 11 in the room, 9 were men. Out of 9 men, 9 men had experienced depression, and all really had that same idea that they couldn't talk about it. So I want to share first what depression is not. Depression is not a lack of faith. For those of you who are Christ followers, depression is not a lack of faith. We can have great deep faith and still experience periods of depression. So before I even go anywhere else, I just want to make sure that we are all in that same understanding. It is not a lack of faith. And depression is also not weakness. A lot of times we can feel like, oh, if I was just stronger mentally or physically, I wouldn't be dealing with depression. And that's not the case either. But what depression is it's an imbalance. It's an imbalance somewhere either in our bodies or even in our lives. If you think about clinical depression, major depression, it is a chemical imbalance in our brains. Postpartum depression, it is an imbalance of our hormones that causes depression. Seasonal affective disorder, it is an imbalance of vitamin D in our body. We're not getting enough sunlight, especially for those of you who live in the Midwest where we have these, and Alaska, where you have these long, dark winter days. We don't get to see the sun very often, and we lack vitamin D, and so we really struggle with that depression during those dark seasons. If your life is out of balance, maybe you're in the middle of a crisis situation, that can cause depression. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what depression looks like. I think sometimes we just think, oh, well, depression is extreme sadness, and I'm not experiencing just, sadness. I don't feel sad all the time. Depression can look like a lot of things. Depression can look like not taking care of yourself, losing interest in the people and the things around you, having a hard time getting out of bed in the morning, because it's just easier to sleep than face the day. I know there have been seasons where I've really struggled with that self-care and with that wanting to get out of bed. And so those are big indicators of depression. Anger, being very volatile, snapping really easily. If you've ever dealt with depression, you can maybe look back at those seasons and go, gosh, I just felt angry all the time. It was like bubbling under the surface. I know I really felt that way with my postpartum depression. It was just always kind of there under the surface, ready to just explode. I was like this walking volcano. It can also look like loneliness and isolation. I mentioned losing interest in the people and things around you. If you are noticing that I just don't have an interest in reaching out or connecting with people or talking with people or being around people, that can be another sign of depression. So I think it's important for us to remember it doesn't always look like it doesn't always look like, oh, I just feel sad and hopeless. Sometimes it looks like I just feel anxious, I feel angry, I don't care about the people in the world around me. I'm missing doctor's appointments, I'm late to work. These are all things that can be an indicator of depression. And the big thing I want you to hear is it's okay to get help. In fact, you need to get help. Whether it is reaching out to an accountability partner, a friend, your support network, and saying, look, I'm really struggling and I just need you to help me find my way back to myself. I think that's the one of the big things with depression too. You just don't feel like yourself. You feel like you've lost yourself. So just having a strong support network of people around you who can help you find yourself again. Talk to your doctor, your medical doctor. You may need to be on medications, and just because you're on medications doesn't mean you're on medications forever. I think it's important to remember that sometimes those can be just for a season or a short period of time. So talking to your medical doctor, talking to a therapist. I'm a huge proponent for therapy and counseling. It's been hugely beneficial for me in my recovery from an eating disorder. And so I highly recommend. I think we can all benefit from seeing a therapist. I don't think you have to be crazy or have a lot of problems or a lot of drama, but I think we can all benefit from having that unbiased person in our life that we can share our experiences with, vent what we're going through, and really just get some professional advice on how to handle it. Prayer and meditation are really great ways. Reaching out to your spiritual community, to your church, to your faith leaders is also a really great way to just face and deal with your depression. It could look like music, getting out in nature, doing things that you love to do, even if you don't necessarily feel like doing them. Sometimes, we may make plans with somebody and it's like an hour before we're ready to go and we just think, oh, I don't want to go do this. Do it anyway. Sometimes just being present in that moment can help pull us out. I had mentioned earlier about depression can look like loneliness and isolation. I think, again, that's one of those like terrible cycles of depression, like the chicken and the egg. What came first, the loneliness or the isolation? Because we tend to isolate ourselves in depression and then we feel really lonely and we feel really lonely and we think, oh, nobody cares. And so we further isolate ourselves. So sometimes just really pushing yourself to just go out and do and be present, even if we don't feel like it. Exercise is another great way to help with depression. I took a stretch class at my martial arts gym the other day, and it was so good. The instructor talked about how stretching can be so good for depression, and it really was. With everything that I have been going through the last couple months with my heart attack and my surgery, and just feeling like I had lost a lot of strength and I lost a lot of abilities, being able to be in that class and just moving my body and working my body again was just so encouraging and helped me see the light that I can be able to get back to my old strength and be even stronger. So exercise is another great way that you can just help with depression. Avoid unhealthy habits, smoking, drinking, eating, abusing your body, cutting, using, different forms of self-mutilation. They're all very common ways to deal with depression, but they're also really dangerous ways to deal with depression. So I would really encourage you to look for things that are not are not going to harm you, are not going to, and I know, having a glass of wine every once in a while can be a great stress reliever. Some people use marijuana as a stress reliever occasionally, but getting to the point where we feel like we're dependent on those things can be really dangerous. But also just be aware. Know what your signs are that you are getting ready to go into this season of depression. Sometimes it can be cyclical. For people with seasonal affective disorder, they know that, fall turns into winter and darker days, and I know that I'm going to be dealing with that depression. And so just be aware of what those signs are that you could be heading into that. I was so thankful that before I discharged from the hospital after my open heart surgery, that the nurses there said, depression's very common after this kind of a surgery. And if you need medication, if you need anything, we are here. We are happy to get that for you. So also know if if you're somebody who suffers with a chronic illness, maybe chronic pain, I mentioned heart disease earlier, diabetes, these things that can be really life-changing, those can really trigger depression, and they can unfortunately make the illness worse. Stress can make the illness worse, stress can make the depression work, and it just kind of gets into this terrible triangle of stress, disease, depression. So just being aware of that and finding ways to just cope with that depression as well are all just really important. So I hope this helps. I hope at the very least that you realize, okay, I'm not alone. Like, I'm not alone in feeling this. We go through seasons of, again, illness, seasons of trauma, seasons of stress, and we feel depression and often can feel like, oh, I'm all alone in this, but you are not alone. Find your support network, talk to your doctor, find a therapist, find activities that bring you joy and are life-giving, and make sure that you're incorporating those into your daily life. Just be well.